Today we are going to explain law of returns to a factor. In our previous lecture, we have explained production concepts, particularly short-run production concepts, total physical product, average physical product, and marginal physical product. Now let us discuss the law of production, that is returns to a factor short-run production function, or law of variable proportion. Short-run production function or law of variable proportion or law of returns to a factor. Returns to a factor explains the total output relation to which one factor is variable while other factors are fixed. As it analyzes the effect of change of the quantity of one factor keeping other factors constant on the amount of output, therefore it is called returns to a factor. Suppose labor and capital are the two factors of production, and of the two factors, labor is a variable factor and capital is a fixed factor. Then short-run production function can be expressed as Q is equal to function of L, that is labor, and K, capital, which is constant, K bar. Short-run production function is defined as when more and more units of a variable factor are employed, keeping other factors constant. Total physical product, that is output, first increasing at increasing rate. And that time MPP rises. Then increases at diminishing rate or decreasing rate. And that time MPP decreases positively. And finally, total product TPP decreases, and that time MPP decreases negatively. What are the assumptions behind this law? First assumption, only one factor in production is variable. Second, it is possible to change factor proportion. Means as we increase the one factor, say labor, then every time the labor and capital, this factor, if capital is a fixed factor, then labor and capital factor ratio keep on changing. All units of a variable factor are homogeneous. Homogeneous means all the factor units are of the variable factor is homogeneous, means identical. They're equal in size, equal in quantity, equal in color, everything from every respect they are same, identical. Technology is assumed to be given and constant. There is no change in the technology, no upgradation or degradation. The same technology is used for the production process. The law applies only in short term. This law of variable proportion or law of returns to a factor, applies only in short run, not in long run. Factors of production are not perfect substitutes for each other. It means that labor cannot be substitute for capital. These are two different factors. They are not perfectly substitute. We cannot substitute labor for capital or capital for labor. This law has three stages, but before we explain the stages, let us know why the law of returns to a factor is called law of variable proportion. The factor proportion or factor ratio varies as one input varies and all other are constant. This can be understood with the help of an example. Suppose in the beginning 10 acres of land and 1 unit of labor are taken for production. Hence, land labor ratio was 10:1. Now, if the land remains the same but the units of labor increases to 2 units. Now the labor land ratio, that is land labor ratio, would become 5 is to 1. Thus, this law analyzes the effects of change in factor proportion on the amount of output and is therefore called the law of variable proportion. Means every time the factor ratio, fixed factor and the variable factor ratio keep on changing, because one is constant, the other one is variable. That's why the ratio keep on changing. We can explain this law with the help of production schedule and the diagram, that is the TPP and MPP curves. Even we represent the APP curve, but it particularly we can show only the TPP and MPP. The law has 3 stages. The relation between variable factor and physical output has 3 stages, which are: stage 1, increasing returns to a factor. In this stage, total output increases at an increasing rate and marginal physical product, that is MPP, also increases. Since in this stage MPP increases with the increase in the units of a variable factor, it is called the stage of increasing returns. In our example, increasing returns to a stage, this stage occurs: first stage, that is 1 unit of variable factor, 2 units of variable factor and 3 units of variable factor employment shows increasing returns to a factor. And in our diagram, increasing returns to a factor, we find that TPP increases at increasing rate till OL1 units of employment of labor and MPP rises OL1 units of labor. So this is called increasing returns to a factor. Now the second stage is called diminishing returns to a factor. Diminishing returns to a factor. Stage 2. In this stage, total physical product continues to increase but at a diminishing rate, and marginal physical product diminishes but remains positive. In this stage, MPP decreases with the increase in the units of a variable factor. It is termed as the stage of diminishing returns to a factor. In our example, the stage 2 runs between, let us see, stage 2 runs between 4 units of variable factor to 6 units of variable factor. 4 to 6 units of variable factor, stage 2 occurs, that is DRF, diminishing returns to a factor. And in diagram we find that L1, L2, here TPP increases at diminishing rate and MPP decreases but positive. This stage is called diminishing returns to a factor. In this stage, TPP reaches maximum. Now this stage continues till MPP 0, and this is called the rational producer's optimum stage of production. This is called rational producer's optimum stage of production. Stage 2, diminishing returns to a factor. Stage 3, when more and more units of variable factors are employed, keeping other factors constant, in this stage, stage 3, negative returns to a factor, MPP becomes negative and TPP slopes downward or TPP decreases. In our example, we find that the stage 3 occurs 7 units of employment of variable factor and 8 units of employment of variable factor. Negative returns to a factor. In your diagram, we find that beyond OL2 employment of labor, stage 3 occurs. And in stage 3, MPP negative and TPP slopes downward. So in which stage TPP slopes downward? In the third stage, negative returns to a factor. Now let us know why these stages occur. What are the causes of increasing returns to a factor? Increasing returns to a factor occurs. The first reason is underutilization of the fixed factor. The amount of fixed factor available in this stage is abundant. Fixed factors are more at the beginning relative to the availability of the variable factor. Therefore, the fixed factor cannot be optimally used due to the non-applicability of sufficient units of the variable factor. Only when more and more units of the variable factor are applied to the fixed factor, that is capital, the fixed factor will be used intensively and total output, that is TPP, will increase at an increasing rate. Number 2, fixed factors are generally invisible. Fixed factors need to be employed in a minimum size. The minimum size of the fixed factors may be greater than its actual utilization in the initial stage. With increased employment of the variable factor, the fixed factor starts getting utilized efficiently. Effective and efficient utilization of the invisible fixed factor leads to increase in total output at an increasing rate. Your total output is the total physical productivity. The third reason of increasing returns to a factor is specialization and division of labor. Initially, there was only one labor working on for entire amount of capital, that is 1 lakh. All activities like maintaining the capital, or if it is labor, suppose uh, the land is the fixed factor. If you consider land is a fixed factor and labor is a variable factor, then all activities like plowing, watering, sowing, etc. were done by the labor. Division of labor was not feasible. As the number of labor units increased, each worker specialized in a particular activity, leading to specialization of the variable units, and this resulted in increased output. Because at the beginning, one person has to do everything and he is master of none, and therefore that leads to, as we increase the labor, the variable factor, that results in division of labor. One particular labor becomes specialized in a particular work or job. Causes of DRF, diminishing returns to a factor. Here what? The marginal physical product starts to fall. Optimum capacity. When the optimum combination of fixed and variable factors is reached, then further increase in the variable factor will cause average and marginal products to decline. It is because the fixed factor now becomes inadequate relative to the quantity of the variable factor. After a certain level, that is optimum level, the variable factor can work with other given inputs. These are the fixed factors, only less effectively. For example, if more than 6 workers are employed, this will lead to fall in more than six, no, more than four workers, or more than 4 workers are employed, then this will lead to fall in MP and AP. If you see, MP will decrease when we are increasing more than 4, means 5 MP falls. From 4 onwards, MP starts to decrease. AP also decreases. So MP and AP both decreases at DRF. Lack of perfect substitutability between factors. The diminishing returns to a factor occurs because the factors of production are imperfect substitutes for one another. For example, more labor can be applied in place of capital, but there is a limit to which one input can be substituted for another. Had the variable factor been a perfect substitute of the fixed factor, then the inadequacy of the fixed factor could be compensated by employing more of the variable factor. However, elasticity of substitutions between factors is what we say is finite. Therefore, when the factor employs additional worker beyond the optimum combination, the availability of capital per labor decreases, leading to a decline in productivity of the labor units. Causes of negative returns to a factor: overcrowd of variable factors. In the third stage, marginal product becomes negative due to the fact that the units of the variable factor becomes too large relative to the fixed factor. It results in low efficiency of the fixed factor. If too many workers are employed by the producers, the problem of labor management may arise. The laborers can avoid work. We know excess of everything is bad. Exactly, this is applied to this situation. The factor proportion becomes increasingly unsuitable for production. There will be lower availability of tools and equipment per worker. If there are too many workers working on given fixed factor, they will come in each other's way and disturb the whole production process, leading to fall in total production. So thus we find the causes of operation of the 3 stages of law of variable proportion. That's all. Thank you.